Hello, RotoBallers. I'm Matt Donnelly, and if you're in one of those 18-week leagues or you're running out a DFS lineup one more time, I got you covered with those wide receiver and quarterback starts and sits for week number 18. Hey, if you're playing fantasy football, we're here with all the advice that you could possibly need. Starting with those starts at the wide receiver position, and it starts with Nico Collins versus the Indianapolis Colts. Both the Texans and the Colts need to win to qualify for the playoffs, so both offenses will be looking to get the ball into their playmakers' hands. For the Texans, C.J. Stroud returned last week and he targeted Collins on 8 occasions, resulting in 7 catches for 80 yards. Collins has been that guy for C.J. Stroud, especially when Tank Dell is unavailable. In games in which Dell has been injured or missed and Collins has played in full, he has seen a 29.9% target share while being targeted on 36% of his routes. Those targets, that has added up to some serious production. 117 yards per game and 4.81 yards per route run, which is the second best average in the league. Hey, guess what? Tank Dell's not playing. C.J. Stroud is. Nico Collins better be in your lineups. The second wide receiver, same game. Michael Pittman versus Houston. Everything I said about Nico Collins, I could say about Pittman here in this spot as well. The Texans secondary, they are allowing the 11th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, allowing on average 35.8 fantasy points per game. If I know that, now you know that, you darn well better believe that Gardner Minshew and Michael Pittman are aware of that as well. Pittman last week hauled in 5 of his 7 targets, making him the first Colts receiver since Reggie Wayne back in 2012 to finish the season with 100 receptions. He's already set a career best in receptions, targets 150 of those, and yards 1,108, with much of that courtesy of Gardner Minshew pulling the trigger in this Colts offense. Michael Pittman, I'm going to tell you right now, is a top 10 dynasty asset when it comes to fantasy football. The third wide receiver I like this week is Wan'Dale Robinson versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Robinson last week hauled in 8 of 9 targets for 55 yards on his way to a 19-point fantasy performance against a good Rams secondary. Robinson's biggest play? It came on the ground on a 24-yard run that resulted in a touchdown. You know what? I don't just love Wan'Dale Robinson because this Eagles secondary is so bad. Fire up Darius Slayton here too. He's a good option coming off a 106-yard performance himself, facing this Eagles team that has given up 899 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 receivers over the last 4 weeks. I mean, that's basically about 21 fantasy points per game throughout the season. Now, other wide receivers that we're sitting this week, Drake London going against the New Orleans Saints. Technically, the Falcons still have like a 10% chance of making the playoffs, but those odds, as bad as they are actually probably better than Drake London putting up 100 yards receiving. Okay, maybe not exactly that way because Drake London, I guess technically has already done that twice in 17 weeks. That's still not good. New Orleans needs a win in this game and some help to make the playoffs, so expect them to game plan around Drake London and do what they've done well all season long, and that is limit opposing wide receivers in fantasy, as they are the 9th stingiest unit on that front. The second wide receiver that I'm avoiding, it's Amari Cooper versus Cincinnati. I'm probably also avoiding Elijah Moore here. Cedric Tillman, you know what, I could probably be talking into that, but when we look at this, if Cooper didn't play last week when the game kind of mattered, there's a good chance that he's not even going to suit up in a game that doesn't matter at all against the Bengals. It doesn't matter to the Browns. It doesn't matter to the Bengals. The only thing that could possibly happen is further risk to injury, and I don't think the Browns want anything to do that. They've already locked up the 5 seed, so there is no need to risk anything in this game. It's meaningless, so do not even think about starting Amari Cooper this week. Now, I did say that this game was meaningless for the Browns and the Bengals, but for T. Higgins, he's the one Bengal that has something that he may want to prove here because he is a potential free agent at the end of the season, and he may be looking to get a little bit more green in that pocket. Now, while I expect the Browns to limit their reps on the offensive side of the ball, I do expect their defense to be ready to go in this one. A defense that has allowed less than 2,000 yards to receivers this season and less than 27 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. For that, I'm probably just fading T. Higgins altogether. As for the quarterbacks here in week number 18, here we go! Jordan Love versus Chicago. The Bears have played some inspired defense as of late, I get it, but Jordan Love is quickly making people forget all about Aaron Rodgers. I think we need to be talking about how good Jordan Love truly has been in the second half of the season. He leads the NFL with 18 passing touchdowns. He has 20 touchdowns altogether in the second half of the season. Not to mention a league high 2,238 passing yards, and he sits third in completions with 183. As for fantasy, he is the quarterback 5 and is averaging 19.5 fantasy points per game. Now, I've mentioned Chicago has been good as of late. They've still surrendered nearly 4,000 passing yards, 28 touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks this season. Matt LaFleur, he has never lost to the Bears, and the Packers need to win this one to stay in the playoffs here. A win this week not only punches the Packers' playoff ticket here, but a playoff appearance also nets Jordan Love an additional $500,000, so you know he's coming out to play. The second quarterback that you can put in your lineup is probably a bit of a cheaper DFS play is Tyrod Taylor against the Philadelphia Eagles. Last week, the Eagles' defense was lit up by Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, and that really didn't surprise anybody as the Eagles have allowed 300-plus yards in 5 of their last 7 games. Taylor, on the other hand, he was a pleasant surprise for many managers during championship week as he threw for 319 yards and a touchdown against a solid Rams defense. And speaking of Kyler Murray and those Arizona Cardinals, start him too against the Seattle Seahawks. Since he returned in week number 10, Murray has averaged 19 fantasy points per contest, which has him as the QB 10 on a points per game basis. Hey, water is wet, and Kyler Murray is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He's also coming off of back-to-back 20-point fantasy outings and has a Week 18 date here with a Seattle Seahawks team that is allowing over 16 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. Murray's dual threat ability makes him a better value this week than quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, who really have nothing to play this week and are more likely to rest. Now, speaking of rest, how about you just sit these guys all together? I'm starting with Trevor Lawrence versus Tennessee. The Jaguars, they need Lawrence to play this week after missing last week's contest. Jacksonville, they currently are holding on to that AFC South title, that number 4 seed there in the AFC. But the Colts and the Texans each have identical 97 records to the Jaguars right now, as do the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are currently on the outside looking in when it comes to that AFC playoff picture. Lawrence, he is banged up. If he plays, he is far from 100%. A couple weeks ago, it was that high ankle. Then it was a concussion. Then it was a shoulder injury there. So expect the Jaguars to put the ball in the hands of Travis Etienne and limit any additional hits that could be coming their quarterback's way. The second quarterback that I'm sitting this week is Patrick Mahomes versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Unless Mahomes wants to simply pad his stats, I don't imagine him being on the field more than just a few series this week. That goes for Travis Kelce too at the tight end position. The matchup against the Chargers is great. This is one of those games you go out there and you can put up 30 fantasy points, whatever you want to do here. The Chiefs at 10-6, they are locked into that 3 seed and they are unlikely to risk any injuries to their key players. And speaking of keeping your key players safe, Brock Purdy is also on my bench this week against the Los Angeles Rams. While the Rams are looking to secure their spot in the playoffs, the 49ers, they have nothing to play for this week. Heck, many have already handed the MVP award to Lamar Jackson, so there's no need for Brock Purdy to even think about starting here. Christian McCaffrey, he's already sitting this one out, so Brock Purdy getting any extended reps this week doesn't make any sense. After all, Purdy himself has been dealing with a couple stingers here the last couple weeks, and we all know that he could benefit from an extended rest, knowing that the 49ers had the bye week already secured. Once again, this video is being recorded on Tuesday, so plenty can happen between now and Saturday and Sunday's kickoffs, so make sure to check out RotoBaller.com and the RotoBaller Discord channel for all the latest fantasy football news. Thanks for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and do not miss any of the great fantasy football analysis we have coming your way. See you next time.